What we're talking about is the good, the bad, the ugly of macros.
The good, bad, the ugly.
That was definitely planned. Todd made that up before we started the camera. So, but we're looking at macros, what they are, how to utilize macros or like track your macros, and then pros and kind of cons of tracking macros. So let's start first by talking about what macros are.
All right.
So
go for it. Let it rip.
You want me to let this rip? Macros are protein, fats, carbs.
That's it.
Right. So what I like to break it down is food has essentially two major categories. You have macronutrients and micronutrients. And the way I like to simplify things without going down a giant rabbit hole of science is macronutrients determine how you look, and then micronutrients determine how you feel. So macronutrients are typically the ones that we look at because they're the bigger, more grand element of nutrients because of the feeling aspect and the impact that they have.
Yep.
Not that micronutrients don't matter, but people tend to focus first and foremost on macronutrients because of the results they can have when it comes to how you look, how you feel, and so forth.
Yep.
And so macronutrients are made up of three major categories. You have your protein, you have your fats, and you have your carbs. And each of these categories have a caloric value tied to them. So protein and carbs are 4 calories per gram, and then fats are 9 calories per gram. So, or it might be kcal, or I don't know what the conversion is, but essentially they each hold a certain value. And so when we look at macronutrients, protein, fats, and carbs, those make up essentially our intake of food. And that's where it becomes very valuable because how much we eat determines typically what we look like, right? Or how much weight we gain or lose.
Right.
And that's kind of the power of macronutrients.
Yeah. And when you're going through that, I'm thinking about micro. I'm just thinking I'm supplementing. We supplement a lot of micronutrients.
Yeah.
So you eat, your calories are macro, you supplement for micro.
Yeah.
They're both, they're
both essential.
Both essential.
Both very important.
Yep.
Just typically, especially I would say in the beginning stages of your nutrition journey, the macro is usually where a lot of people zone in first,
for
typically.
Sure. Yeah.
Not that that's the best play or the only way, but most people do.
Yep.
But they're both very important categories. But what we're looking at with micronutrients is this process of tracking, which is I like to just call it a methodology, but it's a system.
Yep.
It's a nutritional system that people utilize to help them either gain weight, gain muscle, or lose weight. So we're going to look at that process and kind of talk about how do you get started with tracking macros, because if you've never done it or if you have no clue about it can be an extremely overwhelming process.
Correct. It'd be overwhelming. We can make it as easy or simple or as difficult as we want. If somebody's never weighed, knows what 200 grams of protein looks like. If a guy that's our size tries to get 50 grams of protein we're like, you're giving me a blank stare, like, what's 50 grams look like?
Mm-hmm.
All right, man, it's chicken breast. Oh, so there's some relativity there, but if you weigh it out or start to weigh out food, it can get monotonous, can get complicated, trying to figure everything out or have somebody tell you how many macros to have. There's a simple way to it. We can track them there's all kinds of trackers out there, whether it's First Form or whoever. Was it MyFitnessPal?
Yeah, you got
so there's a couple of them.
Macros Stack or Macros First. RP, I think, does the tracking system as well. So there's tons out there.
Yep. So I guess I tracked macros for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
A long time. It gets monotonous.
Yeah.
So there is good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's touch on the good part.
Yeah.
The good part is if you set it at 2,000 calories, you can set macros for somebody, or they can do it online or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's an easy way to figure out how much food you're eating in a day, or to help you. I guess two sides of that. You can pre-plan how much you're going to eat is the best approach, or you can, if you've never tracked before, you can use it as a tracking tool to say, like, oh man, I thought I was eating 200 grams of protein. I'm really only eating 80.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the good part that I see from it, is helping a new person figure out what exactly they are eating.
Yeah, and what I like about tracking, so I guess to step back before I dive too deep into it, what I like about it is essentially it's the idea that you're going to log the value of everything you're putting in your body in some type of way, right? And like I said, every food has some type of protein, fat, carb value to it. So like you said, a piece of chicken might have 50 grams of protein into it, so you know that's going to have this many calories, right? And so that's what tracking macros is essentially is you're looking at how many calories you're consuming. And so I like what you said about it is it can be a system that you utilize to pre-plan, I need to eat 2,800 calories, Monday through Sunday, and here's what I'm going to be, this is how I'm going to do it, right? You can create that plan, which is a super cool method. But I also like what you said is it's also how you can evaluate what you're eating, because time and time again, when it comes to what we eat, especially people we get in this gym, we go through the process, we talk about nutrition, and like 9 times out of 10, most of them don't understand what protein is. They don't understand how much they're eating and are not even close to eating as much as they should be eating. And so
for sure.
And the way we can evaluate that is simply by tracking. We could take a day and use the app, any type of appers thing and say, oh, hey, I ate a piece of chicken. I had 1 egg. And that was it. It's like, okay, you maybe had 60 grams of protein. And it's just like,
you're not eating enough.
Yeah.
And that's a good point to that, James, is people are eating less than what they probably, they're eating more than what they think, but they're eating less protein than what they think.
Yeah. And that's I think that's the fun thing about and I agree. Then we'll talk more about the bad side is tracking can get very monotonous, but it's also a valuable tool when it is utilized in a intentional way. I think that's a great way to kind of phrase it. Yeah. When you use macro or tracking in an intentional way, you can see the bountiful benefits it has. And like you said, it's an easy way to see what you're under consuming and what you're over consuming. Because just as we said, I'm not eating enough protein, but holy crap, I had 600 carbs. It's like, I don't even work out. Well, you probably don't need 600 carbs then. So it's one of those things where you can start to see where your nutritional habits lie and how we can start to balance those things. Because not saying that carbs are bad, but if I'm having 600 grams of carbs and 10 grams of protein, there's a better way to fuel yourself. Especially if you're not super active, right? And we can start to take in all those things. And that's what's super cool about macros and tracking those things is it can go in many ways depending on your goal, right? If your goal is to lose weight, you think about things like deficit. Okay, how do I eat a little bit less to lose a little bit of weight at a steadily approach, right? And how we kind of focus on those things is by tracking our macros. And we, like you said, you find that bottom line, 2,000 calories. If you want to lose a little weight, we just take 100 calories out, or whatever it is. So you eat 100 calories less. So that approach becomes a little bit easier when you're tracking because you can do it in database.
You got the numbers.
Yeah, you have the numbers. And sometimes for some people, that's the easiest way to do it, right? Especially depending on your experience level. The more higher level experience, typically that tracking process becomes a little bit more beneficial, right? Yeah. Because
if you're doing bodybuilding or whatever.
Yeah, you need to fine tune those things at a little higher degree rather than someone who's just starting out. So, yeah. Anything else you think macros got?
On the good part?
Yeah.
It runs 7 days a week.
That is true.
A lot of people will track Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And then forget about Saturday, Sunday, or they start to look at it and going, oh, crap, I had cinnamon rolls for breakfast on Saturday morning. How do I put that in it? But it is good if you put it in, there goes 600 calories that it was on a slow plate. All right, now it hopefully it clicks something for them that all right, that makes sense. So that's the good part.
There's a little bit more of a accountability aspect to it. Yeah, I like that idea. That's totally true because there's times where because I'm tracking my macros currently right now, and so I look and I'm like, okay, well, what can I eat? What can I eat? Kind of thing. You start to become a little bit more aware.
Conscious of it. Yep.
And that can be a very beneficial tool, especially if you are trying to lose weight, right? Excuse me. Let's see. So I think let's go ahead and start moving into the danger lands of tracking macros.
Sure.
So, and there's a lot, but I'll let you start.
So for me, I'll give you my point on it. So after tracking for 10 years, last September, my tracking, the membership that I was getting ready to use was running out after a year of being with them. I'm like, I got to do it. I'm just gonna. I've eaten this way for the past 10 years. I know how to figure this out. And the day that I deleted it, it felt like the weight lifted off me. The good part is it told me how much to eat every day, and it also told me when to eat every day.
Mm-hmm.
So every time my phone would ding, time to eat, and you had to eat this much food, it was adding stress to me that I didn't know. And I was eating when I wasn't hungry. I was eating according to my phone, not really according to my body. So that was my biggest takeaway when I stopped tracking, was taking pressure off myself to eat even though I'm not hungry.
Kind of created like you almost had a dependency on the device
100%.
rather than like like independence.
Yep.
Yeah, and so rather than like, I can see that. That's a neat perspective. I've never thought about it that way. But it also brought up a good point that I think you mentioned that kind of hops back to the good side, not to give like macros all the talk, but like you said, it does help you almost create a habit of like what to eat.
Oh, for sure.
I didn't think about it that way, but now that we talked about after doing tracking so long, and I know this from personal experience as well, is I can hop off tracking. I know typically what I need to eat and how much I need to eat without weighing it, without measuring it, without tracking it, and I can maintain my physique or do just fine.
Yep.
And so that is another beneficial tool. But to look back on that flip side of the downfall of tracking macros is, I think this kind of goes into play we were talking about, is it's almost, I don't know how to explain it. It's a stress that is just absolutely nagging at all times.
Yep.
Just because you think you have to track. And you're just like, oh shoot,
I gotta weigh my food.
Or I gotta weigh my food. Right. And it does start to make the cooking process, and I love cooking, so I don't usually have too much of an issue with it. But it can make that cooking process very tedious, because you're like, oh, it's like I can't just mix everything together. I got to know how much chicken I got to have, or I got to know how much, this I have to have. And so you start to realize it starts to make those things that used to be enjoyable or a little bit more fun, kind of takes away. Makes it a little bit more of a stressful process and so forth.
And I have witnessed this, people taking scales with them to restaurants. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you can go over the top with it. So,
yeah.
And now you said it adds something that you can't see. It adds stress to it, or adds stress to yourself that your body knows is there, but you don't feel it, which is actually adding weight to you. So when I quit tracking in September, I lost 7 or 8 pounds within 2 or 3 weeks just by not tracking. And I'm still eating the same food, but it was just that stress of just walking in my food every day. Yeah, it was interesting. If you'd have told me that, I wouldn't have believed you.
Right.
Until it happened. Like, oh, all right, this is cool.
Yeah, and I think a part of it, too, that comes with tracking is the reality of things. It's a great tool, but it's not realistic in the sense that you're not going to track probably for 80 years of your life.
Right.
It's a great tool to use temporarily, like you said. You did it for 10 years.
Yeah.
That's even longer than I do it. I have done it. Yeah. I typically do it in 6-month spurts, or I'll hop off, or I'll do it for a couple of month spurts, or hop off, depending on what my goals are or what I'm doing at the time.
Yep.
But it's not a 80-year sustainable thing to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Who wants to weigh out chicken breast every time?
Exactly.
Not doing it.
Exactly. It's not a realistic, sustainable lifetime thing. Again, a beneficial tool, but
good for check-in. Even like somebody that's been eating, like I hop back on with an app for 8 weeks in a challenge I'm doing with them. It's interesting, but I'm tired of it. Like I'm already all right, I'm over this. Is this 8 weeks up yet? But it's okay.
Right.
It's fun.
And I think the other downfall to it is sometimes it gives you also this murky, I'm going to use murky. I like the word murky image of actually what you should be eating, because it starts to take in this idea of like your activity level. And then so you start to think about like, well, I burned 800 calories in my workout, but I also did 20,000 steps, which burned another 300 calories. So my thing says I'm supposed to be eating this many calories. And then you just start to fall into this very deep number land, when in reality, if you just eat, like you said, like where you're satiated, you feel good. And when you're hungry, 9 times out of 10, you're either going to A, maintain weight or lose weight, or B, feel great. Like you're not going to go over the top. And so I think that tracking the macros sometimes can get you in this land. And I think it's that stressful aspect too. You just start to get overwhelmed with all these numbers. You're like, oh my gosh, like I'm supposed to eat 100,000 calories. Like I found myself doing it. I'm like, man, I'm supposed to eat another 1,000 calories. I'm like, how am I supposed to do that in like an hour?
When you said something about maybe think about another point of the bad part. You can have 2,000 calories. You could eat 12 protein bars and hit your macros.
Oh, yes.
So, I mean, you can cheat the system. Sure, you're still getting your calories. Are they quality? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so that's, I think you started off the conversation with being able to track it as something to use it to track real food.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to. I mean, used it with intention. It's right.
Yeah, there's some people that like, oh, it fits my macros. And
It fits my macros.
Exactly.
Yep.
That used to be a huge thing. I think it's starting to
It was.
evolve a little bit, but
Yeah.
it used to be. I remember like, oh, I ate a entire pizza today. It fit my macros.
Right.
I'm good to go.
Done.
So,
Yep.
and like I do agree with that. Is typically when most people take that macro approach. Not often do they focus on quality of food.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
Right.
do I hit my numbers? And I think that's absolutely a downfall to it, because the reality of it is, like, yes, I could eat pizza probably every day if I really wanted to, but am I going to really feel that good? No, I know I won't, because I've ate pizza and I'm just a slob afterwards.
Right.
Like, so it doesn't have that holistic element to it where we focus on the quality of food. We just focus on getting my numbers.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. So
Absolutely.
That's another good bad point.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think ultimately we can start to kind of bring like conclusions to all this and why we're like diving into this land. And I think ultimately it's just to show that and we're going to continue. We'll have more episodes. We'll talk about a lot of different things when it comes to nutrition. And what's unique about nutrition is there's multiple nutrition systems. And I like to use the word nutrition systems because that's what it is, really.
For
the
sure.
reality of it is it's just a system that you're using to help yourself.
Yep.
Lose weight, gain weight, whatever goal it is, but it's to fuel your body in some type of capacity. And so when we look at these nutrition systems, the first one we kind of discussed today was that idea of tracking macros. That's a nutrition system many people use. There's a lot of major companies out there. There's people that do it as nutrition coaches use it. So it's a tool that's got very good benefits. And I don't want this episode to end on a bad note, like don't track your macros.
Right.
Because it can be a very beneficial tool.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's important to realize is it can be a beneficial tool. And I use can because it can also be a bad tool.
Used with intention.
Right.
Yep.
And so it's making sure when we're using those things, we have a solid focus, and maybe it's needing the guidance. Maybe you need to know how to properly do that system, right? How to utilize the macro system, like how do I go about it? All those kind of things. And that's where, asking Todd, asking anybody, or one of the CrossFit coaches here at CFA, or whatever it may be, but finding an expert or someone who has a sound knowledge in those things to get some guidance in those things, because it can be a very, like you said, stressor. It can just be a stressor that pushes you the other way rather than pushes you forward. So I think that's the big thing I want to like throw out there is it's a great system. Just make sure you have an intention behind it.
Yep, absolutely.
So
I agree. There is, you said it, we'll go down some other paths. Lead into that with real food, which we'll catch on the next one or some episode down the line. But even eating real food within and tracking is key. It's got to stay holistic or real food.
Ultimately, it's just. And even myself have gone down that road where I focus mostly on eating whole, real food, and it's hard to overconsume real food. Trust me.
You've seen fat hippopotamuses, but you haven't seen like a fat giraffe or a whatever.
Right.
It just doesn't happen.
It just doesn't happen because they're eating real food, and it's hard.
Yep.
So. Right on. Is
awesome.
there anything else you want to add about macros, the tracking world, anything like that?
No. I guess if people at CFA have got questions about macros, I've got 10 years of experience.
Yeah.
Talk to me. It's that easy. We can go down that road if you want to, but I like real food.
Yeah, so do I. So there's tons of approaches out there, and we'll continue to dive down each of those approaches and talk different things nutritionally. But again, if you guys have questions, you can leave it in the comment. You can reach out to us on social media. You can find Todd himself, and we can connect you guys that way as well. But feel free to ask questions when it comes to nutrition or tracking macros, whatever it may be. Other than that, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more.